When I started this audio journey, one IEM stood out to me due to the hype that it had in a Discord server that I joined, and that was the ND NSK. It was definitely a very interesting IEM when I tried it out the first time, and it made me wonder, what is ND doing now? Well, let's talk about their newest releases, the ND DD3 and the ND Nice, in today's episode of OP Reviews Audio. The ND Nice is priced at around $26, while the ND DD3 is priced at $18. They both come in very similar boxes and very similar unboxing experiences, with the only difference being the Nice having a slightly smaller box and the DD3 coming with a tuning switch. They both come in the same cable, same ear tips and holder, and even the same carrying pouch. Pretty solid way of saving costs in my opinion. The ND-DD3 uses a metal faceplate and resin material for its inner shell. It uses the tried and tested QDC connector, and it also features 3 tuning switches each side with 4 different tuning modes. It features a single 10mm dynamic dual cavity magnetic dynamic driver. The ND Nice, on the other hand, uses a zinc alloy for its faceplate and the same resin for its inner shell. Now it instead features a single 10mm PET diaphragm dynamic driver and a single custom balanced armature. The cable for both IEMs is a 4-core silver-plated cable terminated to 3.5 and an interface of 0.75 QDC. Now, the build of the ND-DD3 is acceptable for $20, with the aluminum alloy faceplate adding a somewhat premium feel that complements the solid-filling inner shell. Now, the fit is surprisingly good, even with the stock tips. I found that it plugged into my ears really well with pretty good seal. Longer listening sessions proved to be no issue thanks to the rounded shell design free from any pressure in your ear. The Nice, on the other hand, has a similar build quality but feels considerably more refined. The faceplate looks sleeker, more mature, and is made of a glassy black, which looks honestly very handsome. Fit is unfortunately not as good compared to the DD3 due to the somewhat smaller nozzle of the Nice, but your mileage may and will vary. The cable is a rather basic silver-plated cable that is functional, although quite memory and toggle prone. It works, but honestly, I've had much better cables for this price range. Now, moving on to the sound, let's start with the DD3, and since there are 3 different configurations, I'm going to talk about my favorite one, which is the 00 or 011 configuration, and I'll compare it to the others later. Now, for the sound signature, this has a V-shape with extra vocal energy and not a lot of treble extension. It is quite easy to drive. It can work off of a smartphone. It'll definitely prefer a more neutral source. It doesn't scale that much with power. Now, with the bass, it is quite elevated, it's quite engaging, and surprisingly textured. It's not the tightest, it's a very fun sounding bass, and the balance of sub bass and mid bass is good. And the slam is surprisingly good. I really like the bass quality of the DD3, honestly. It reminds me so much of the Let's Sure D13, or the, I guess, nerfed version of both the D13 and the EA1000 or EA2000. Those two have similar bass qualities that the DD3 has a less refined but still similar, that engaging, punchy, and rumbly type of sound. Now, the mids are definitely recessed. There's a little bit of warmth and body coming from the bass. It is quite scooped, and especially in contrast to the overemphasized upper mid-range. And speaking of the upper mid-range, it is very, very, very forward. It is super engaging and in your face, but it is definitely shouty. It is definitely not for the shout sensitives, shoutlets. Look away from this IEM. It is very, very shouty, but it's very upper mid forward, so if you want something like that, yeah, it's pretty good if you're into something like that. It honestly kind of masks the rest of the mid range with how forward the upper mids is, so definitely, you know, consider your choices before you get the DD3 when it comes to its mid range quality. Now, for the treble, it is on the darker side. It's more fatigue-free than revealing. It is great for treble-sensitive people, but the micro detail definitely struggles. It's also not that resolving sounding when IEM. The air region is definitely choked, but it is more smooth and lush in that treble region. Again, good for treble sensitive people. Now for the tone and timbre, it is kind of weird due to the overemphasis in the upper mids that puts the vocals a little bit way too forward in my opinion. But the bass tone is really good, like really genuinely good. However, the mids isn't so much, and the treble is definitely more on the darker side, so the tonal balance is a little bit more skewed to the upper mid range and the bass region. So yeah, not too bad, but it's definitely weird. It's definitely unique if you listen to this. Now for the technicalities, it's not very good. Even for $20, it can separate basic tracks, but it struggles with even just slightly more complex tracks. The stage is quite small and compact, and imaging is more or less a little bit more two-dimensional than three-dimensional. There's decent left and right, but not a lot of forward and up type of layering and imaging. Now compared to the other tuning modes, the 010 is the most neutral sounding mode. What I mean by this is the bass isn't as emphasized, and it basically turns the IEM to a mid-centric set that actually sounds pretty decent for mid-centric, mid-focused type of genres. It's very forward in the vocals, still very much shouty, but it kind of like in an earbud way in my opinion. Now the 110 is the thinnest sounding one, and can make vocals sound quite thin and dry. I'm not a big fan of this mode because it lacks the bass that what made the OG tuning good, and it kind of lacks the coherency in the mid-range that the 010 had. And lastly, the 100 is basically the 011, but with less treble, and it brings the bass and vocals a little bit more, makes the sound overall darker. I'm not much fan of this mode either, but yeah, it's definitely a more if you find the stock or the 011 tuning to be too harsh, too sibilant, well, this is the mode for you. And let's finally move on to the next IEM, the ND Nice, and as the name says, it's quite nice, and I'll talk more about that. Starting with the sound signature, it is your traditional V-shaped IEM with a little bit more energy in the treble. Now for drivability, it is quite easier to drive compared to the DD3, so it's very much easier to drive, and I quite find that this scaled pretty decently with sources. It teams the upper treble or upper mids a little bit better. It makes the bass sound even tighter, which was really nice. And speaking of the bass, it is more of a mid-bass than sub-bass type of presentation, but it's super good texture and punchiness. It is super engaging, very dynamic sounding. It is not very tight. It's kind of bleeding into the mid-range, but it kind of gives vocals a sort of warmth that isn't too bad compared to older sets that try to do this kind of sound signature. And moving on to the mids, it is definitely recessed, but it's not as bad as the DD3, at least. It has again the bleed that colors the vocals a little bit warm, and it kind of puts male vocals as well, at least the higher frequencies, a little bit more distant. Female vocals are quite forward and energetic, and still honestly pretty nicely placed in the mix. They're definitely on the bordering shouty side, but it is just forward enough for my own personal taste that I enjoyed listening to vocals here. Now for the treble, it is quite sparkling, energetic, with pretty decent detail. It kind of is a bit edgy at times, and there is definitely a metallic timbre to it. But the micro details are quite decent for what it is. Now for the tone and timbre, there's a slight incoherency between the DD and the BA. There is a metallic timbre when it comes to upper mids, and even though the bass tries to catch up, tries to be tight, it's not enough to have this coherent sound with the bass and the upper mids to treble. It just doesn't sound as natural sounding as dynamic driver sets in the price range, or not even just in the price range, but just in general. This is something that's common with hybrid budget IEMs, as I've mentioned before, but it is, expected for the price range. Now for technicalities, it's decent all across the board. For the price, it's decently wide, nothing too spectacular. Imaging and layering are definitely better than DD3, but it's really not that exceptional. It is pretty decent for the price, but nothing, again, too special for what it does. Now to conclude, honestly, both sets are quite interesting for the price. The DD3 is definitely not a set for those looking for a neutral sound, but it is definitely unique, and the bass presentation is quite satisfying. Definitely not for shout sensitives as well. The Nice, on the other hand, is kind of this nostalgic sounding IEM that is akin to the older sets like the KZ-ZSN Pro X's, the ZS10s, the ZSTs, those older sets, but this is a much more refined, more well done type of sound that still has that signature metallic hybrid sound in the budget range that I understood, but it is definitely a very more nostalgic sound than something trying to cater to the modern tuning standards. It also comes with, the waifu pretty decent accessories for like its asking price. It comes with a good amount of tips, really good presentation. It comes with a carrying pouch, or well, it's more like a egg pouch more than anything. But hey, at least you get more accessories than what your usual KZ provides. So if you're looking for something a bit more niche, you want to go for the DD3, you want something more bass-centric, something more vocal-centric as well, that's for the DD3. And if you want something a little bit more nostalgic to the olden times of the V-shape, hybrid, brighter leaning sets, then the Nice is the IEM for you. But overall, the ND sets right now, pretty unique, pretty interesting IEMs, but definitely not something to properly compete with the market today that focuses more on a more naturalistic tuning. The ND series currently is more trying to figure out their footing in the market. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the ND DD3 and the ND Nice. Let me know what you think about the ND DD3 and the ND Nice. Do you want to buy one? Do you already have one? Let me know down in the description. Down in the comments. So yeah, if you like this video, like and subscribe. Check out my socials down in the description. Join the Discord server, Audio Notions. And with that, OB Audio out.